Welcome back to another Christmassy video. Yay! It's so exciting. I feel like I'm on Fox News or something, like a news reporter. It's very official somehow. I couldn't keep you guys waiting. You wanted me to make this video, and I have kept you guys on tenterhooks a bit, wondering if I was ever going to make this video. Here we are. I said I'd make this video, and I'm doing it. Today we're talking about Victorious. You wouldn't think that you'd have anything to say in regards to a show like this because it's a show aimed towards kids and tweens, and normally it's just not that interesting to talk about, but this show has so many layers and so many problematic things about it, but it is a show that we do kind of love, I think, because we're quite nostalgic about it. I know that I still have a lot of fond memories of watching this show. Was I 12? Maybe 12. I do really like this show. I'm not going to be sitting here and saying that it's terrible and that it's not funny or anything. I do have criticisms about it, but I do genuinely enjoy watching it, and I do think that there are a lot of good things about it. There are problems too. So today is a deep dive into this show. So before we get into it, make sure you subscribe, click the bell icon, and then all so you get all notifications. Otherwise YouTube might not notify you that I'm uploading videos and you don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's start off with Tori Vega, the main character. Victorious really wants to push Tori as the most talented singer because she is the main character. The show is literally called Victorious, and the whole thing is about her. But the sad reality is that she is continually outsung and outshone by the other people that she knows. Their mics have to be lowered when they're singing with her, or they're not allowed too much attention in the limelight. They can't sing by themselves too often, and often she needs to duet with them just to make it really clear that she's the best one, because unfortunately Victoria Justice, the actress, is a good singer, but Jade West, Valentine, the actors who play them actually did Broadway and are just on another level of talent. So I kind of feel bad for Victoria Justice because she's actually not a bad singer, but the reality is she seems bad in comparison to these other singers who are just way more talented and honestly are better on stage too in terms of their performance level and their kind of charisma when performing as well, which is a sad truth. Additionally, I feel bad for Victoria Justice because she plays a character who is in reality one of the more boring characters in the show and who lacks personality compared to the other characters. In season 1, Tori does start off as more of the relatable girl, the girl who does feel like she's not as talented as everyone else, so she is quite insecure about herself, and she's the one who's asking questions like, wait, what is improv? Or how does this work? And so I do think it's mean when people say that she's useless or something, because Tori does offer a lot in the sense that we're meant to relate to her because she's this normal girl, the kind of girl who seems like a real person, and she's in this school full of all these eccentric people who are so wacky and talented, and it makes her feel a bit out of place. That's kind of the whole point of the show. But the problem is that Tori actually doesn't develop and become much more interesting throughout the series. This is where the problem comes in. Tori doesn't really look at her friends throughout the whole show as much more talented than her, and she doesn't sit back and take notes and learn so she can improve. It's more like she acknowledges their talent, but she thinks that she's just as talented a singer or performer as they are, and so she's always given all these huge opportunities and cast in roles simply because she is the main character, which I think makes a lot of people resent her because it doesn't feel earned, because in comparison to the others, no, she would not be getting the main role or that big audition. I think that's actually why a lot of people don't like Tori, because they feel like she's not humbling herself and she's not watching and learning from others, but instead she's just having opportunities handed to her because apparently we're meant to believe she's the most talented when clearly she's not, and that's where a problem comes in, I think. Another reason why Tori isn't a very liked character, particularly in the fandom, is because of her behavior when her friend Kat gets a boyfriend. The guy Tori actually knows or used to date, and so Tori gets super jealous. She sprays hot cheese on them, and then she ends up kissing Kat's boyfriend, and obviously Kat is so upset about this, and it was a really bad move on Tori's part. And another reason people don't like her is because in the episode Prom Wrecker, Jade wants to star in her one-woman show, but at the same time Tori wants a prom to happen at Hollywood Arts, and so she basically orchestrates it so their prom will take place at the same venue and time as Jade's one-woman show. So yeah, maybe it wasn't the most thoughtful of Tori or the most considerate, but I do think that overall, when you look at Tori as a character, yeah, she's made some bad decisions, but she's not the absolute worst. And it is a bit weird when people act as if she's like the most horrible character. I think she's a bit boring, but she's not terrible. And also, people criticize Tori for all these things, but then Jade does loads of terrible stuff that they don't criticize Jade for, that they overlook. For instance, Jade sending Tori poisoned flowers. I think because people find Jade more funny, more charismatic, more relatable, they support her even when the stuff she does is actually really messed up. And then they hate on Tori for kind of not really doing anything. Honestly, I don't get the hate on Tori. She's not a great character, but she's not awful either. And the thing is, I felt bad for her at points. Jade was so mean to her sometimes and was mocking her, making fun of her, going out of her way to ruin Tori's opportunities. She almost got Tori killed, if you remember the blood transfusion situation where Tori almost died. And Tori's done some good things, like she refused to kiss Beck because she thought about her relationship with Jade and didn't want to jeopardize that. And at multiple points she's tried to make Jade and Beck a couple again and bring them back together. Another reason I kind of feel bad for Tori is that her parents really suck at points, especially her mum, who was literally having an affair with her husband's cop partner and then is making comments about how handsome he is to Tori's face. And oh, she can be a really bad mum, really selfish. So yeah, I think Tori does deserve to be cut a bit of slack. And also, a lot of things that she says or does have an unclear meaning. You don't know whether she's got something going on in her mind she's not saying, or whether you could interpret her behavior in two different ways. And so maybe there's more going on under the surface because you just don't see it the first time. So I don't think she's that boring, actually. And I think it's easy to label her as boring because she's surrounded by a lot of characters who are very almost exaggerated, like stereotypes or cartoon characters, and so of course she's going to look a bit flat compared to them because their personalities are larger than life. But that's my thought overall on Tori. And now I want to talk about Valentine, who I think is one of the most interesting characters in this show because of how confusing it is at times to understand like what's going on with her or where they were trying to go with her. But in season 1, when you compare her in season 1 to season 4, she's unrecognizable. It is literally two different people. It's crazy to think that it's meant to be the same character. The way she talks, the things she says, the way she thinks is insanely different. They completely change her character. In season 1, she's kind of ditzy and airheaded, but it feels very realistic. She does feel like a realistic person. She can hold a serious kind of intellectual conversation. Sometimes she does get a bit giggly and say stupid things, but kind of all within reason. Like she feels like someone you would meet. She doesn't feel particularly exaggerated, and sometimes she can be a bit silly, but she's all lovable. But at points she does things without thinking about it properly. Like, was it grizzly glue she put on Tori's face without thinking about the fact that it's gonna stick or something because she got distracted by the photo of the cute bear on the front. She seems like the sort of person who'd leave her door unlocked or just be a bit too trusting in the world. And she's also very sensitive too. Like, she has this thing, it's a running joke, where if someone says something that offends her, she'll say, "What's that supposed to mean?" And she takes it really personally. There's this really uncomfortable scene in Survival of the Hottest that shows that she's a bit I guess, forgetful sometimes because she's meant to be getting water or something. I don't know. Was it to go to the bathroom? I have no idea. But she was meant to go back and see her friends, but she got completely distracted because she met these cute guys and then she started hanging out with them for hours, and then they're all spraying water pistols at her or something, and she's like, oh, stop, oh my God. And it's a bit uncomfortable. I don't know why that was necessary, but she's completely forgotten about her friends, and then she comes back hours later after they've all nearly died of heat exhaustion, and she's like, oh, sorry. Then in like season 3 and 4, suddenly overnight her entire personality changes with no explanation, and her voice becomes much higher pitched. Sometimes the things that she says don't make a whole lot of sense, and she finds things amusing that maybe other people wouldn't. It honestly seems like a coping mechanism, to be honest, her being all childish, especially because we know that she's not always like that, because she wasn't like that before, so why the change? She has a lot of mood swings though. She can go from being quite happy to being absolutely furious and really angry in an instant. Like, I remember there was this conversation with Robbie where it didn't go so well. I think she saw him with another girl or something bothered her. Then you realize how much emotion she's bottled up, because then she throws a chair onto the ground with all this force and you're like, oh my God, it's quite scary. So there is a lot going on under the surface, I think, even if it's not visible. People are talking about something and then she'll make a comment that's actually got nothing to do with what people have been talking about. But I'm saying this from a good place because I actually love Kat, and I don't think any of these qualities make her any less than or something. I think she's awesome. She's just different, and the way that she thinks and processes stuff is different. But she's honestly very likable, and I don't think the show would be the same without her. The one consistent thing too that she's always mentioned is having what she calls psychological problems, and she was even saying that in season 1, like, my red hair has nothing to do with my psychological problems. And you get the feeling she has a pretty messy home life with a lot of very eccentric relatives, especially her brother, who has actually done some criminal behavior before. She has her red hair because her brother thought she was an intruder and smashed a vase over her head, and then she liked the color and chose to try and recreate it. So yeah, there's some kind of trauma there with her not necessarily feeling safe around her family. And at one point, I think it's Beck and Jade arguing or something, and then Kat gets really upset and she starts saying, I'm under my bed, I'm under my bed, I'm under my bed, like she's having a panic attack, and then she passes out. So hearing them shouting at each other obviously made her think of her parents, which makes me think there's maybe some domestic abuse going on, or at the very least, a very stressful home life. She can also be very impulsive and very obsessive. She gets addicted to things as well. What's interesting too is a lot of Ariana Grande impersonators will impersonate Kat Valentine rather than Ariana. So a lot of people don't know how to distinguish and know the difference between Ariana Grande and the character of Kat that she's playing. In the episode Tori Gets Stuck, Kat gets accidentally thrown into a psych ward because when she stops off at the hospital, with the way she's talking and stuff, the people there think she's crazy, so they put her in a psych ward with padded walls and everything, and Kat's just having a great time and doesn't even seem to notice that it's weird or that she shouldn't be there. She's just playing around going, ooh, look, pretty fun. And sure, it was amusing, but I do find it a bit problematic and also completely unrealistic. That would never happen like that. She's definitely the most genuine, real character in the show though, because a lot of the time it's like she's just honestly expressing what we feel, but we're too scared to say, and often she kind of breaks social conduct rules and just does whatever the hell she wants, which I kind of like, so I do have a soft spot for her. One interesting thing about Kat though is she's not really flawed. Like, other characters will actually be mean and do nasty things, but often if Kat screws up, it's not because she's trying to hurt anyone. She doesn't think things through sometimes, but she doesn't really have a bad bone in her body. Some darker moments of hers have actually kind of involved Robbie, just because there's been some hypocrisy there. Like, she's called him gross and rejected him and ignored him, but then when he starts to move on or be interested in other girls, Kat can actually get really kind of upset and territorial around him. I honestly had no idea what was going on between her and Robbie. It was so all over the place, but at one point he actually made a move and kissed her, and she seemed happy about it, but then it's like she freaked out and found it way too much and couldn't deal with it and then ran away. I'm not sure that she really wants like a serious relationship or is ready for one, because with a lot of her relationships, they kind of just faded. And also at one point I felt bad for her. She went through this phase where she was really insecure as well, because she was dating this guy and she had blue contact lenses and a blonde wig when she met him, and then he said that he liked that look, and then she got paranoid that he wouldn't like her for her, and so she was keeping up this facade of pretending she looked different to how she actually looked. And she seemed so set on like getting him to like her, and then at the end she was saying, oh, maybe I should dye my hair blonde, and she just wasn't getting the hint, which was kind of sad. I remember too that one weird episode, wasn't it Jade and Tori and Kat? They all went through this phase where they were obsessed with this one guy, Moose, and they were trying so hard to impress him. I don't know why, he wasn't even that special, but all of them were going out of their way to like try and woo him. Now let's talk about Andre, who I really like. He's definitely one of my favorite characters in the show, not because he does anything particularly exceptional or stand out necessarily, because he actually wasn't given that many chances to develop or change, but I just like him because he's fun to watch on screen and he just has like a nice presence. The first thing I'll say is I find it odd that Andre never has a relationship with any of the main white girls, because Beck's obviously with Jade and Tori's there being best friends with Andre the whole time and nothing's happening. I could totally see Andre and Jade actually being a couple. I think that would really work, but then nothing's happening there. Kat had this soft spot for Andre and he called her Little Red. He had a nickname for her, but yet nothing was going to happen there. Nothing was happening between Trina and him. Not that there should be, that would be terrible. But my point is, it's a bit odd to me that Andre didn't have a relationship with any of the main girls. It just worries me a bit, especially because he and Tori had such a close bond and yet they never ended up dating. I kind of have mixed feelings about this, because even though they'd be quite a cute couple, I do like the idea that they could just stay platonic friends and prove that yes, indeed, guys and girls can be just friends. It is nice, but also why not? I just don't get it. The reason it bothers me that Andre didn't date Tori or something, or date Kat, is because he has all the qualities that you'd expect from like a stereotypical love interest in a rom-com. He's attractive, he's sweet, he's always been there like in the background the whole time. He writes love songs and performs them with Tori, like he plays the piano, you know. You see what I mean? Andre is a really cool character and he has so much potential, but it's just never really utilized. And I feel like he really needed his moment in the spotlight, but apparently Tori is so important. She's always needed whenever he writes a song to sing it with him, or he just plays and she sings or whatever. And as a result, he doesn't really get his chance to like develop and stand out and do something different. And a lot of the time, to be honest, it felt like he didn't have his own stories. Like he was kind of there to help Tori out or whatever, but he wasn't really doing his own thing. And that's where it's a bit disappointing, because you have a lot to work with him. It was kind of unexplored. But in terms of the next character, it's Robbie. So where do you start with Robbie? Robbie has a lot of different sides to himself and he could be a well-rounded person, but he's not comfortable embracing all those different parts of himself. So he's kind of separated them, like those sub-personalities, because the way he behaves is very awkward, shy, insecure. And then he does have, I think, that side to him that's quite confident and almost a bit aggressive and a bit of a ladies' man, but he can't deal with those qualities, or he doesn't know how to embody them, so he projects them all onto Rex, his puppet, because Robbie's a ventriloquist. Rex is very loud and attention-seeking and has all these qualities that are the polar opposite of Robbie's. And I think Robbie's mental health would be a lot better if he just embraced those qualities rather than pushing them onto a puppet, you know, if he just took all the different parts of himself and put it all together. But he's not doing that, and I do think Robbie has some trauma for sure. And sometimes Rex, his puppet, does creepy things or really vengeful things involving like hurting other people, and then Robbie will cover it up for him and make excuses for him, and it's all well and good until you realize that Rex is not real. Rex is not a real person. Rex is a puppet, which means that the person doing those creepy, vengeful, nasty or inappropriate things is Robbie. And when you think of it that way, it's kind of creepy because that's all him, but he's not wanting to admit that it's him or take accountability for that. So he's saying, no, Rex did it. I didn't do anything, Rex did it. And even when he's alone in his room, he still talks to Rex as if Rex is alive. I'm not sure he quite gets that Rex isn't a real thing. And when Rex got kind of chopped up a bit, Robbie was devastated about the thought of Rex dying. So I think he's living in a bit of a fantasy world. Often when Robbie says something kind of stupid or clumsy, Rex will tell him off and make fun of him. So I think that's Robbie's way of embarrassing himself, and it's his inner critic talking and like telling him off, saying, oh, you shouldn't have said that, why did you say that, that will make you seem so lame. And that just shows how much he hates himself, because he's constantly telling himself off all the time and embarrassing himself. The puppet was very flirtatious and kind of sexual with a lot of girls on the show, like Robbie's creepy side coming out, but it's coming out through his puppet because he would never have the guts to say a lot of that stuff himself, so he does it through Rex. But also it does feel like kind of a cop-out because people feel like they can't tell him off because it's just Rex saying it, but really it's Robbie saying it. The puppet was way less flirtatious with Kat, which I think is interesting because Robbie had a genuine crush on Kat, so maybe he didn't want his puppet to be flirting with her because he actually liked her. I know Robbie wrote a whole children's song about broken glass, and he's full-on stalked some girls at his school, like hiding in bushes and watching them, and he even insists that Trina's in love with him because of this scripted kiss that they do, and keeps trying to pressurize her to like be with him. And then he does the same thing with Kat when he gets it in his head that she likes him in like season 1. He's way creepier in season 1, I think, but still, that's not the behavior of like a cute lovesick nerd who doesn't know how to relate properly to girls. That's actually some really serious warning flags of very potentially dangerous behavior, because he was not respecting boundaries, he just kept pushing. Robbie was taking advantage of Kat's naivety and her ignorance around stuff, because at points she did seem a bit scared of him and felt like he was a bit rough, and she was a bit avoidant around him. And I've seen this trope in a lot of shows where they have a guy who is nerdy and awkward, and so a lot of his behavior is excused because it's made out that he doesn't know how to talk to girls and he does have good intentions, but he just doesn't know how to be normal, when in fact the behavior is actually really unacceptable. I know that Kat had told him she doesn't like how he plays pirates. I don't know what the hell that's supposed to mean. I know they do a lot of make-believe games and role-playing and stuff, but is she a mermaid and is he Captain Hook or something, and does he get a bit rough, or does it mean something more sinister, like he was touching her inappropriately? I don't know. Maybe that's a saying. On Urban Dictionary, play pirate is a pickup line used on women or men. Want to play pirates? What's that? We go under the sheets and find the booty. Okay, that's quite funny. The thing is, if that's what Robbie was doing to Kat when she didn't want him to, then that would be really bad. Assuming he wasn't doing that and touching her without her consent, I would just say that Robbie isn't like necessarily a bad person or nasty, but I do think that he has some creepy sides he's not really wanting to acknowledge because he knows they're wrong, and so he'd rather say Rex is doing it. And I also think he's quite disturbed and didn't know how to communicate his genuine feelings, like romantic feelings, in a healthy way. He can be sweet sometimes, but there's more going on under the surface. that I don't necessarily like. But I will say that I disliked him a lot more in season 1, and by the end of the show I think he became a lot more likable and we saw a lot more of his soft, less creepy sides, which is nice. But let's talk about Jade next. So when it comes to Jade, I think she is one of the most interesting characters in the show. Jade and Trina are my two favorites. I think they're the best for sure. Jade tends to be one of the funniest along with Trina, and also some of her lines are actually genuinely well written, and often I'd laugh at them, not just because there was a laugh track and so I was confused into thinking it was funny, but I mean some of her lines are genuinely comedic and the actress's delivery of them is really good. She seemed quite jealous of Tori at first and bitter because she thought Tori was hitting on her man, but after a while those feelings seemed to evolve into her actually wanting to be close with Tori but not knowing how to express it, and so she was just kind of being a bit rough with her. But there is this weird thing going on between the two of them where there is a lot of like sexual tension there, and it does seem like they like each other but don't realize it, in a hate to love kind of thing, enemies to lovers. And I do think that if Jade was a boy and Tori was a girl, it 100% would have been a proper relationship, but I don't think that Nickelodeon wanted to go there, and so there are just hints at it, which really sucks, because if you're gonna hint at it, you may as well just go all the way with it, seriously, because I could see something going on. It's very obvious too. Like, remember that scene where they were forced to go on this date to get to know each other a bit, and then one of them said, "You're pretty," and then the other one was like, "Oh, you're pretty too," and then they both got really awkward and didn't know what to say. And then when she's upset about Beck, Tori is the first person she wants to go to. I know she's pretty mean, but I honestly think that's like a defense mechanism, and I think it was an example of how much Tori intimidated her, because otherwise she would not be behaving like that. I do think she has a soft spot for Tori, but she just behaved like a jerk. And I also think that she has a soft spot for Kat, because she's honestly pretty nice to Kat a lot of the time, and that actually ties into Beck, who's Jade's boyfriend throughout a lot of the show. Beck's an interesting one. I think it's fascinating how everyone complains and whinges and calls Tori basic and faceless and empty. Beck is that times 100, but yet nobody criticizes him because they find him attractive. I just think that's such a double standard and so unfair, because if you're going to criticize any character in the show for being boring, it is Beck, 110%. Cool, calm, collected, a nice guy. That's all we know about him. That's all we're given. And also, he was really over-sexualized throughout the show. It's like his personality trait was being attractive. The actor said that he had no recollection of actually filming Victorious because he was struggling with an alcohol dependency at the time. His character does live in a trailer. What I find interesting about this is he's not homeless or something. He does have a house, but he just doesn't want to live with his parents. And I got the vibe that his parents are actually really controlling and overbearing, and I would have loved more details about that, because that could have given a whole lot of perspective on his character. And I do think that one of his standout moments was when Tori needed someone to do a stunt for her. She was too scared to do it, and so Beck filled in to do it for her, and he got an address and everything and then did the stunt pretending to be her. That was so cool. But with Jade and Beck as a couple, I have a lot of thoughts, but them ending up together does a disservice to both their characters, because it's like a step back. There was a lot of shouting, a lot of arguments, and I think the only reason why people were even remotely okay with it is because a majority of the time Jade's the one yelling, getting nasty and aggressive, and not Beck. But if the roles were reversed, I can guarantee that people would have way more of a problem with it, because at times Jade was really freaking mean to Beck. I know Beck has his problems, but Jade was so reactive, and Beck couldn't do anything without Jade breathing down his throat and making everything into a fight. Both could be at fault though, obviously. Beck expects Jade to just be cool with the fact that girls are flirting with him, and he's acting kind of oblivious to it, like, really, she was flirting with me? Oh, I don't know, I don't really care, I'll just go with the flow. And so that encourages girls to flirt more with him because they think they have a chance, because he seems open to it, and that's really douchey behavior. But then he'd gaslight Jade and basically make out that she was being oversensitive and overreacting, when actually he should listen to her and validate her feelings and understand that it's totally understandable if it annoys her that girls are constantly hitting on him. But instead, she was made to feel crazy for feelings that were actually actually completely legit. He'd make comments like, "Look, Jade, it's not my fault you get jealous," and he was making out that it was all her problem, but he was kind of playing a part, and it would have been nice if he'd done more to reassure her that he wasn't going anywhere. But that being said, Jade was so insecure, and then he'd react to that and be like, "Oh, will you just shut up?" And then it made him want to not be with her anymore because she was sabotaging it. Yeah, they were just a mess. I didn't like them together. Now let's talk about Trina. Her jokes always land. She's always hilarious. She has such a huge presence in front of the camera. I know she's annoying. She totally is. She's so annoying. But I do think that sometimes people were quite mean to her for no reason when she hadn't actually done anything wrong. Like, her parents were quite mean to her and made fun of her. She was obnoxious, but sometimes she could actually be a good sister to Tori, and Tori didn't always recognize that. Like, at one point, Tori was going to get locked up in jail or something, and Trina was so upset, and she was like, "That's my sister." She was actually the most annoyed about it out of everyone, which I thought was really cute. I know she's completely deluded about her singing abilities and stuff, but it's kind of sad because she's clearly really passionate about the arts and about performing, and she would need to work hard to excel at it, and she's not just naturally gifted like all these other kids are. She is good at script writing. Like, she wrote an entire play all by herself and then memorized the whole thing and then performed the whole thing. And that takes a lot of guts and a lot of skill. Not anyone could do that, you know?
I can't believe I'm here in the city of Chicago. Why, anything could happen to a woman like me here in Chicago.
It's also odd how everyone in the show acts like she's really hideous and gross when she's actually pretty. She's not ugly. What are you guys on? I also think that we're expected to hate her, and so we never look at anything from her perspective because we're not meant to like her. Trina's not that bad. However, Trina can be a jerk as well. I think one of Trina's worst moments was when she was going around telling the whole school that her and Beck were dating just to make herself seem more desirable. And then, just to prove her point, she kind of grabbed him and kissed him at school without his consent, just to make her point extra clear. And I was not okay with that. I thought it was a horrible thing for her to do. She has her issues for sure. She's very entitled. I'm not saying she's a good person, but I do think she's a bit more complex than people let on, perhaps. She's not just like this dumb, ditzy, annoying character. Okay, Sikowitz. This is another really key character. He's kind of the hippie type. He's eccentric, unprofessional, and he's the teacher at Hollywood Arts who has no idea what he's doing. Some of his advice can be horrendous. Often you'll see him dangling upside down from the ceiling for no reason. And he's got this obsession with coconuts, which to me, like, if this was an adult show, obviously the coconuts would be magic mushrooms, right? Surely. I know they can't say that, it's a kid's show, but it's implied, right? Subtext, symbolism. He's meant to be lovable but unconventional, but realistically his behavior would actually have him fired from any school because it's so unprofessional and breaks like 5 kajillion rules. He wants them to do better at method acting, so he invites them over to his house for a sleepover. To his house. Okay, why? Who put this in the script? To be honest, it kind of makes sense though that he's a bit of a weirdo when you look at who's running the show, the people behind it, what's going on behind the scenes. That's one of the reasons why I feel like less positively towards the show now than I did when I was first watching it, because I did some research on sort of who was working on the show, particularly Dan Schneider. He's like a writer, producer, director, and he was very heavily involved with making Victorious what it is. And now I know that, it makes me like the show less because I don't like Dan Schneider. I think it makes a lot of sense when you look at some of the creepy things that happen in the show, when you look at the fact that Dan was kind of involved in that. In 2018, his time at Nickelodeon ended amid allegations of verbal abuse and questionable treatment of young stars. YouTube videos about all the dodgy stuff about this guy, which again doesn't surprise me. Throughout the show there are a lot of sexual jokes that are kind of hidden and made to seem innocent because obviously a lot of kids and like tweens were watching this, so they couldn't have it be really adult and explicit. I say that, but yet there are so many adult jokes. Like, I think Jade's microphone wasn't working, and so she said to Sinjin, hey, can you turn me up, please? And then Sinjin was like, oh, I would love to turn you up. And then everyone laughs like it's funny, and then Jade's like, shut up, Sinjin, sort of thing. Why so many of those jokes? I understand one or two, but they're throughout the whole show. A constant theme of feet throughout, to the point that it's ridiculous how many feet are featured in this show, and on iCarly too. I know that was regular. There was this weird video of Kat spilling water over herself and squeezing a potato, and it's honestly disturbing to watch. That's not even funny. It's just honestly incredibly sexual and way over the line. And it makes it worse because Kat is the most childish and innocent, wide-eyed ones out of the characters. Fetishizing her, kind of problematic in itself. The girls in Victoria's fight all the time, have these feuds, compete over guys, all this drama, but then often the guys are quite positive towards each other, but it's the girls that don't like each other, and that makes them so much more unlikable because of the fact that they just cannot be civil and get along, because often male writers can't process the fact that women can actually be friends and get along, but they always need them to have cat fights and stuff. Also, I remember when I was watching it, adults hitting on Beck. They knew he was like underage, like an ambulance driver was saying, oh, how old are you? Why? Just cut that out. That can be in the first draft, but you don't put that in the actual show. We don't want to see it. It's weird. And there are so many other problematic things too. I'm just at the tip of the iceberg, but if you rewatch the show as an adult, you look at things very differently and you go, oh, that's kind of awkward, and you see things you just didn't notice before as a kid because obviously you were young and innocent. Why would you notice it? But it's a little bit weird when you think of like the target demographic. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I've loved talking about it. So excited for the upcoming content, honestly. But thank you for watching. Make sure you follow me on social media, and I will see you guys for my next video.